In between the two missed opportunities by the Saginaw County Sheriff's Office to launch the yellow flag process and confiscate Card's guns, the Army Reserves became aware firsthand of Card's potential danger. Phil Hirschkorn continues our reporting.
After tipping off their county sheriff last May that a well-armed Robert Card was experiencing a severe mental health crisis and nothing happened, his family turned to the U.S. Army for help. After all, Card had served in the reserves for 20 years, primarily as a firearms and grenade instructor, reporting for monthly drills on weekends at his unit base in Saco, and for a 2-week annual summer training session at the Army's Military College in West Point, New York. His sister, Nikki, told the Lewiston Commission she tried 5 times to connect with her brother's unit in the spring of 2023.
I found accessing my brother's chain of command to be a significant challenge. Despite exhaustive online searches, I couldn't find clear information on where to report my concerns. Despite leaving numerous voicemails, none were returned.
By mid-July, without any intervention, Card went to West Point, along with 15 to 20 men from his unit. Fellow soldiers who'd known Card for years told the commission they immediately saw something was wrong.
You swear the testimony you...
Matthew Noyes, a 17-year Army veteran who's also a sheriff's deputy in Androscoggin County, was staying in the same hotel.
Throughout the day and the evening, we collectively noticed that Card was exhibiting strange behavior, and we notified our command.
He was fixated on people were talking about him behind his back. He would just go on and on about people talking about him at the drill hall and, people were talking about him at work, around the town of Bowdoin, at the convenience store.
Staff Sergeant Darrell Reed, an accountant in civilian life who spent 20 years serving in the Army and Reserves, had considered Card a normal, quiet guy, and he never overheard the kind of derogatory comments Card was complaining about.
The people were calling him a pedophile?
Yes, sir, a pedophile, a homosexual, and that he had a small package.
Meaning his genitalia?
Yes, sir.
So he had taken a photograph of his genitalia and showed it to people to try to discount that?
Yes, sir.
Card even accused Reed of spreading those rumors and tried to pick a fight with him when they went out to get pizza and beer.
And he came at me like he wanted to fight. Card's fists are balled up and he's fired up.
No fight occurred, and returning to training camp, Card stormed off to his room. Master Sergeant Ed Urich, a police officer in Brunswick with 36 years of service in the Army and Reserves, went to check on him.
I did. I found him standing outside his room. He was crying. And I said, "Sergeant Card, what's going on?" He said, "Everyone keeps talking about me." And I said, what does that mean? He said, "I just want him to stop talking about me."
Urich called Card's family, and his brother Ryan told him Robert had recently started wearing hearing aids due to hearing loss sustained from years of exposure to grenade explosions.
I did not think that Sergeant Card was dangerous. I thought his hearing implants were really messing with him and his decision making.
Like the past 6 months, he just got these brand new hearing aids, and it's messing with his head.
That first night at West Point, after the altercation with Reed, Card locked himself in his room and refused to answer the door. Urich, joined by the Reserve Unit's number 2 in command, First Sergeant Kelvin Mote, a police officer in Ellsworth, used a master key to get into the room, and they observed Card with a blank, 1,000-yard stare.
He has to go somewhere.
The next morning, they called New York State Police.
Robert.
3 troopers arrived at his room, their conversation captured on body-worn cameras.
Can you open the door for me, please? Thank you, my man. You want to throw a shirt on and come in and talk to you?
A shirtless and clean-shaven Robert Card answered the door, let the troopers in, and put on an Army T-shirt.
What's up?
What's going on that your staff is concerned about you calling us?
Because I flipped out on someone messing around with me, and they're cowards and ran away. And
Card told the troopers he'd been hearing reservist friends ridiculing him.
What kind of stuff were they?
I'm gay, I'm a pedophile, I like little boys, I like little girls.
The troopers told Card the Army had command-directed him to undergo a psychiatric exam. Card accepted the order.
I hope you understand that they're concerned enough about your welfare that they called us.
Oh, because they're scared, because I'm going to friggin' do something, because I am capable.
Like, what do you mean by that?
Huh?
What do you mean by that?
At that moment, I decided he was going to the hospital, one way or the other.
The Keller Army Community Hospital at West Point.
First Sergeant Moat was one of 3 Maine law enforcement officers who accompanied Card on the drive to nearby Keller Army Community Hospital.
I told him that he was there because we were concerned about him. He needed help. And I came right out and said, you have to have some rational part of your mind that knows that these voices are not real.
Well, what did he say?
He never said a word, and he stared right straight through me. He never even blinked.
Major Matthew Dickinson, a psychiatric nurse practitioner at Keller Hospital, told the Lewiston Commission he interviewed Card one-on-one for 45 minutes to an hour.
Mr. Card was exhibiting psychosis and paranoia. Mm-hmm. And I actually had safety concerns because he was actually assigned with his unit running a range where he had access to weapons and munitions.
Dickinson felt Card's paranoia about people calling him names was escalating.
You know, if people didn't stop this, you know, that something was going to happen.
But he didn't say he was thinking of shooting anybody.
No, nothing like that was said to me.
But Dickinson updated Card's military profile to restrict his access to military weapons for 90 days.
Welcome to Four Winds Hospital.
Dickinson told the commission he felt Card needed more intensive care, so he had an ambulance take Card to the private Army-contracted Four Winds Hospital, an hour away in Westchester, New York. Card was not committed. He agreed to go. He stayed for 19 days. According to the Army's own investigation, Four Winds Hospital diagnosed Card with psychosis and homicidal ideation. Card acknowledged having a hit list and said a reservist who wouldn't stop talking about him would be added to my list. Card said he had changed his civilian truck driving job schedule to nights to avoid seeing people. And one psychologist found Card's paranoia is of sufficient magnitude that it may reach delusional proportions at least part of the time.
Jeremy Reamer.
And you swear that the testimony...
While Card was hospitalized, Major Dickinson called Card's reserve unit commander, Captain Jeremy Reamer, and recommended that both Card's military and personal weapons should be removed from his home in Maine. The Lewiston Commission questioned Reamer twice.
So you knew the diagnosis they had, right?
Yes, sir.
Card's lead psychiatrist at Four Winds, Dr. Sarah Klagsbrun, told the commission in a private interview she deemed Card safe to be released on August 3rd, given Card's progress, agreement to continue therapy and medication, and stabilization.
Safely and
Master Sergeant Urich told the commission he was surprised the hospital let Card leave, and so was Card's family.
We thought that he was going to be there for a very long time. And when Ryan Card called me and said he was out, I said, that can't be true. And he said, actually, how naive I was. I said, well, then he's all better. And he said, no, he's still the same. And I said, I don't believe that the hospital released him the same way they got him. I just don't believe that. And he said, he is the same.
On August 5th, 2 days after leaving the hospital, Card went to Coastal Defense Firearms in Auburn to pick up a suppressor or silencer that he'd ordered online. But on the background check form, Card mistakenly self-reported he had been committed to a mental institution. That prohibited him, under federal law, from obtaining the silencer. He left the store empty-handed. Four Winds Hospital had given Card a prescription for the antipsychotic drug olanzapine and a schedule of follow-up appointments. The hospital asked his reserve unit commander, Captain Reamer, to ensure Card stuck to the treatment plan.
Did you do that?
I was not provided in his discharge as far as when his follow-up appointments were.
Card did not keep his medical appointments and stopped taking his antipsychotic olanzapine pills. Investigators would later find 53 left in a bottle of 60. According to the Army investigation, Card told his medical providers and a friend the drug made him feel lazy. Despite first-hand knowledge by numerous Maine law enforcement officers in Card's Army Reserve Unit about his problems, his New York mental hospital stay, and the Army's confiscating his military weapons, back here in Maine, none of those officers took any steps toward confiscating Card's personal weapons, such as by using Maine's yellow flag law.
Did it occur to you that someone who knew him from the Army Reserve might want to do something about his access to weapons?
I would say that that responsibility fell on the local law enforcement jurisdiction.
But you can get.
The Office of Sagadahoc County Sheriff Joel Merry had jurisdiction over Card's hometown. But Merry told me no one affiliated with the Army or Reserves ever gave him a heads up. No phone call, email, or voicemail.
Well, when you stop and think that the Army was informed by the hospital that Mr. Card should not have any weapons, both in a military setting and in a private setting. And the recommendation was that that information should be passed on to local law enforcement, which we know now never occurred.
Nobody told you that?
That is correct.
Nobody in the Army, say up in West Point or in Washington, or none of the cops that you know who are in that Army Reserve unit who knew what was going on with Card, nobody told you that?
That is correct.
Nobody told you, as the hospitals found, that he had psychosis, that he had a hit list, that he had homicidal ideation?
That is correct.
If you had been told about that, if you had been told about his mandatory mental health hospitalization for 19 days in between the two visits your office tried to execute, what would you have done differently?
Well, I think there would have been a different approach, and there would have been a strategy around how to approach Mr. Card and remove his weapons.
Card's commanding officer.
The Lewiston Commission concluded the leaders of Card's reserve unit failed to take steps to reduce the threat that Card posed.
Card's commanding officer knew of his auditory hallucinations, increasingly aggressive behavior, collection of guns, ominous comments about his intentions. Despite their knowledge, they ignored the strong recommendation of Card's mental health providers to stay engaged with his care and take steps to remove weapons from his home.
In mid-September 2023, when Card's close friend, Sean Hodgson, texted the unit's top two leaders, Captain Reamer and Sergeant Moat, that he believed Card could snap and commit a mass shooting, they asked the Sagadahoc County Sheriff's Department to attempt a fresh welfare check on Card.
So when you had a conversation with Moat after you sent this text to him, did you take back anything that you had written in the text?
No, I stood by that text.
When you spoke with Captain Reamer, did you back off or tone down anything that you had written in the text?
No, they were asking me why I thought that. Did he make direct threats? But I was like, yeah, I feel as though he's going to do this. It's gradually getting worse. And yes, he did threaten people at the unit.
First Sergeant Moat told the commission he had no luck himself reaching out to Card.
I called, but he never answered my calls.
Did you contact the sheriff's office to inquire as to what their plans were?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Why not?
So, in the law enforcement community, if I make a complaint to you, do a request, if I tell you how to do your job, you're going to hang up on me.
Because I trusted that the law enforcement, based on the information they get, that they would take it and run with whatever policy and however they wanted to handle it. Well, I was asking them to go out and put eyes on him and check his well-being.
And to see if he was a threat to himself or others.
Well, for them to make that determination, yes.
Aaron Schofield, the Sagadahoc County Sheriff's deputy tapped to do the welfare check, told me when he talked to Moat that day, he undermined Hodgson.
The text that was sent to him was not all that credible. That he exaggerates, he's over the top. No one from the Army, none of these people that are cops had communicated to me. How hard is it to say is, no, Aaron, this is the real deal. We're worried. That changes things.
Maine Governor Janet Mills believes the Army Reserve Unit leaders dropped the ball.
They should have, but did not share all the important information that they had about the perpetrator with the Sagadahoc County Sheriff's Office. At multiple critical junctures, members of the U.S. Army Reserve ignored, downplayed, and failed to share information with other law enforcement or take action that could have changed the course of events.
Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine Executive Director David Trahan, who helped craft Maine's yellow flag law with due process protections for gun owners, believes it should have been invoked against Card.
There was a culture that was around Robert Card at the time. A lot of police officers, a lot of fellow military. I believe many of them were friends of Robert Card, and likely were giving him some sort of cultural deference they wouldn't have to, say, a person off the street.
The Army Reserve declined our request for an interview, but in a press conference upon the release of the report on its own investigation, the Lieutenant General in charge, Jody Daniels, explained how commanders' power over reservists is limited.
That a U.S. Army Reserve soldier is only in a duty status for about 38 days per year, and outside of that duty status, unit commanders have no legal authority to compel soldiers to undergo medical treatment, to execute follow-on care, or surrender personally owned weapons, regardless of the circumstances.
That position irked Maine U.S. Senator Susan Collins, who had requested the Army investigation.
I found that to be a completely unacceptable excuse and a very disappointing one to say, gee, it's not really our fault because we don't have day-to-day control of this individual. You can extend the active duty time of a reservist. And when Robert Card came out of the mental hospital, there's no reason why they couldn't have extended his active duty time.
Lieutenant General Daniels said the Army did make contact with Card's family, but there was a miscommunication as to who was removing his weapons. Daniels' overall assessment was harsh, and 3 reserve leaders were sanctioned.
While unit leadership took several consistent and sustained actions to address Sergeant Card's deteriorating mental health, his mental state, there were also a series of failures by unit leadership. I have held members of the chain of command accountable by taking appropriate administrative actions against the officers found derelict in their duties.
That's not enough for the families of Lewiston victims who are planning to sue the Army.
This was not a situation where someone just snapped and no one had any idea it was going to happen. The warning signs were there were failures, and now comes the time for accountability.
Later this hour, we'll hear more from victims' families about why they want to sue the Army and how Maine's 2 U.S. senators want to reform it.